So home address versus virtual office, which is better for business credit in 2025? So one of my most commented YouTube videos is where I showed how lenders weren't a fan of certain virtual addresses, and some lenders were denying business applications specifically for that reason. I wanted to do a follow-up video to that because a lot of people don't realize that the address that you put down on your business paperwork can actually make or break your business credit card application. All right, so let's break this down. When you're setting up your business, there are basically 4 types of addresses you can use. You've got your home address, which is exactly what it sounds like, just using your apartment or your house. You got your commercial office space, which is like a dedicated building or suite that you're renting or that you bought. You've got PO boxes, which are pretty much useless for this conversation because literally no bank will accept those. And then you have virtual offices, which is where you can pay for an address at a business center, but don't actually have physical space there because people who have startups from home are worried about using their residential addresses, thinking that's going to be an automatic denial if they use that. So I want to talk about that specifically for 2025, and let's go into the details in today's video. So banks and lenders don't actually care if your business is home-based or if it's in a fancy office building. What they care about is that you have a legitimate physical location that satisfies their compliance requirements. That's it. They need to know where your business actually operates from, because if they lend you money and you run off, they need to know where to look. It needs to be a reputable place. Let's talk about home addresses. Using your home as your business address is completely fine with most lenders. Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Capital One, all of them will accept a residential address for your business. Especially after COVID, with so many businesses going remote, this has become even more normal. The key thing is that it has to be a real street address and not a PO box. And while this used to be looked down on a bit before the pandemic, a lot of people run legitimate businesses from their home office. As long as it makes sense for the type of business that you're running, you shouldn't run into a problem. If you say that you're running a manufacturing plant out of your 1-bedroom apartment, that's going to raise some eyebrows. But for consulting, e-commerce, content creation, software, all that stuff is totally normal to run from a home office. Now let's talk about commercial office addresses. This is obviously the gold standard from a perception standpoint. Having a dedicated commercial location definitely makes your business look more established, but honestly, it doesn't give you that much more of an advantage with lenders anymore. Yes, they'll accept it without question, but they're not giving you extra credit score points just because you have an expensive lease. What matters way more is your payment history, revenue, time in business, and for many people, that's going to be personally guaranteeing. You need to have your credit profile in top shape. The only real benefit here is if your business type actually needs a physical location, like retail or something with in-person clients. Otherwise, you're basically paying thousands a month for very minimal benefit when it comes to business credit. So now this is where things get interesting. Virtual offices. These are addresses where you can get at places like Regis or Opus, where you're basically renting the right to use their address. You might get mail service, maybe conference room a few times a month, but you don't actually have a physical space there. And the $1 million question is, do banks accept those for business credit? And the answer is, it's complicated. It really is complicated. On paper, a virtual office looks like a real address. It's a real building with a street address and a suite number, so it can pass initial automated checks. But banks have gotten really good at spotting virtual offices. Their systems flag known virtual office locations, and many underwriters will manually check addresses that look suspicious. Let me give you a real example. I was working with someone who used a Regis address for their business. They applied for a business credit card and got denied. The reason: unable to verify business location. Now here's what's interesting. Some banks might still approve you with a virtual office, especially if the rest of your application is strong. But they may classify it as a mailing address rather than a physical location. And they might still ask for your actual operating address for their records. And honestly, that is the issue. Virtual offices are in a weird gray area. They're not outright banned like P.O. boxes, but they're definitely more scrutinized than your home or commercial address. And that scrutiny can lead to delays or denials. But here's what most people miss. Banks don't mind if you have a virtual office for your public-facing stuff. What they care about is knowing where you actually operate from. So even if you use a virtual address on your website and on your marketing materials, you should still be prepared to disclose your home address to banks if that's where you actually work. Now it's 2025, and one thing has definitely changed since the pandemic. Banks are much more accepting of home-based businesses. An estimated 40 to 50% of small businesses operate from home right now, and the number is probably even higher for solopreneurs and startups. Lenders care way more about your digital presence than your physical one. They rather see a professional website and consistent revenue than a fancy address. So here's my take. If you already work from home and don't have client visitors, just use your home address for banking and credit applications. It's honest, it's free, and it satisfies compliance requirements. Then, if privacy is a concern, you can use a virtual address. If you're using a virtual office, be upfront about it if they do ask. Don't try to pass it off as a physical location if it's not. Tell the bank straight up, hey, I use this virtual office for mail and meetings, but my day-to-day operations are from my home office. Most banks will appreciate the transparency and just note both addresses in the system. One thing I want to point out, a lot of people think that their business credit score will be lower if they use a home address, and that's just not true. Business credit bureaus like Experian and Dun & Bradstreet don't penalize home-based businesses in their algorithms. What they care about is consistency and accuracy of information. What can hurt you is having different addresses scattered across your business records, the same way we talked about on your personal credit profile, having multiple addresses, multiple spellings of your name. It's the same thing. When they see all those variation of addresses, names, spellings, banks will get nervous and you will see more denials. I know someone who started their e-commerce business from their apartment. They used their home address for everything, bank accounts, vendor accounts, business credit cards, and qualified for a $50,000 line of credit, all while operating from their living room. The key here was they were consistent with their information, paid everything on time, and had a growing revenue. Their address was almost irrelevant compared to those other factors. So, if you are a home-based business with no client visitors, just use your home address for banking and credit application. It's free, it's compliant, and it won't hurt your business credit. This is ideal for online businesses, consultants, content creators, freelancers, and most service-based businesses. If privacy is a big concern for you, I get it. Some people don't want their home address on public records. In that case, use your home address for banking credit applications and use the virtual office as your mailing address. This gives you the best of both worlds, compliance for the banks and privacy for public-facing stuff. If you're a business that actually needs physical space like retail, food service, or a business with regular client meetings, then yes, a commercial office makes perfect sense. In that case, you'd want to use that address for everything. If you're a business that's growing and starting to have team members or client meetings, but not ready for a full office lease, a co-working membership might be the sweet spot. Places like WeWork or local co-working spaces give you an address plus actual physical access. This is more legitimate in the eyes of lenders because you can truthfully say it's a place where you guys conduct business. And here's something that a lot of people miss. Most business credit products for new businesses rely heavily on the owner's personal credit score and income. As I always say, guys, you cannot escape your personal credit profile. So focus on improving those factors first before worrying too much about your address. But there are definitely situations where you need to be more careful with your address choice. If your type of business seems incompatible with a home address, you might face more scrutiny. For example, if you say that you run an auto shop or a restaurant from your residential address, lenders are going to have more questions. In those cases, you really need a commercial location or at least a good explanation. If you're applying for a major funding like an SBA loan, While they don't outright ban virtual addresses, SBA lenders often want to visit the business location as part of their due diligence. If they show up at your virtual office and find only a receptionist who doesn't know you, that's not a good look. If you're in an industry that requires special licensing tied to a location, like certain professional services or a regulated industry, make sure your address choice complies with those requirements. Never use a registered agent's address as your primary business address. These addresses are shared by hundreds or even thousands of businesses, and they're immediately recognizable to lenders. They'll either reject you outright or demand your actual physical location. And as I mentioned earlier, there's also the risk of getting associated with any negative history tied to that address. This is also true for mailbox stores like UPS store locations. Banks can easily identify these as commercial mail receiving agencies, and they'll almost always reject those as a primary business address. They're fine for mail, but not for your official business location. The last thing to consider is consistency. Whatever address you choose, make sure it's consistent across your business records, your LLC filing, your EIN registration, your bank accounts, your business credit bureaus, and vendor accounts. Inconsistency can and will cause file mix-ups and create red flags for underwriters. So pick one approach and stick with it. I'm curious, what kind of addresses are you using currently for your business? And have you been denied credit or banking services because of the address that you provided? Drop it in the comments because I want to see what different experiences people are having with this in 2025. Also, if you've successfully built business credit using a home address or a virtual office, let me know what your experience has been like down below. If you found this helpful, make sure you're subscribed because in the next video, we're going to talk about how to break down the 5 biggest mistakes people make with their business addresses that absolutely destroy their chance of getting business funding. Trust me, you guys are going to enjoy this. Make sure to go ahead, once again, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification, and I'm going to check you guys out in my next video. Have a good one. Peace.